Hello everybody, this is Moses from ZAATAR Gardens, and this is episode 107 of Gardening Without Edits. I'm going to show you something where I've tested it over the years and years and years to see if it's true, if it's not. I've read many articles, I've talked to many growers, I've talked to many elders that I know of gardening for. One of them has gardened for 80 years, 90 years old now, 89. When she was a little kid, but every year has gardened and almost every year has eaten in season. Doesn't believe in buying tomatoes in January or winter months, let's say. So anyways, one of those things I tested, let's flip the camera around, is apple trees. Let me show you specifically. Well, I'm assuming I'm going to put it in the title so you know what I'm going to talk about. So there's something called a king bloom. There's a big set in apples. Like this is a Fuji right here. This is actually like a maybe 6-in-1 variety that I kept grafting. Here's one graft over here, etc. There's a lot of grafts. Here's another graft right here. This is a King David right here that I grafted. Good, it's growing. I was worried. I was looking over here. So it's growing. So regardless, anyways, the base is a Fuji, and these bright red flowers are Fujis. Okay, let me go back over here. So you can see that, let me zoom in. You can see that in the center, there's one big flower bud. And on the edge, there's typically 4 to 5, sometimes 6 flowers. So the central flower bud typically opens first, and that's the most important one to cross-pollinate. Or at least what I've read and what I've heard and what I was told. But there's zoom out. There's people that say you should always, now you can see right now, you see the 6 little flowers around and then one big one that's opening first, the king bloom. People say you should thin the king bloom out so the other fruit can size up, or you should actually thin all the little flowers around after they all pollinate. By the way, you want to cross-pollinate as much as possible, then thin. You don't want to thin now. And then the king bloom will produce a big apple. Now, I can attest to that on some varieties, on my pink lady and on this Fuji. If I thin out every little flower and leave the big flower in the middle, the king bloom, I get one big apple, as opposed to other clusters that I leave on all of them, or I remove the king bloom. The one that has the king bloom only in the spur has a bigger apple. So I don't know. The jury's still out on this, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't know if you should thin the middle flower. I don't know if you should thin the outside ones. You don't have to thin at all. But if you go to the store and you notice that there's some apples that are flat on all sides, that's because typically they didn't thin the apples at all. They're just trying to produce as much cheaply, the cheap apples in a bag. Those are typically ones that, obviously didn't make grade, but they're typically ones where they let the tree just produce as much as possible just to get some apples in a bag cheaply. It's not going to taste the best, and they're not going to be sized the best, but if you're growing for yourself, it's always going to be the best compared to what you could buy in the store, regardless if you thin or not. So, I don't think it really needs to be done, but sometimes, I rather have a good amount of fruit that's moderate size than too many fruit that are tiny as apples, or very few fruit that are big. So I rather have moderate. So I usually thin half of these fruit, don't care which one. And sometimes they say if you leave the king bloom or take off the king bloom, the rest of the apples will be very seedy. There's all these kind of stipulations and ideas. So anyways, let's end the night, or end this video, with the sunset again. Happy gardening, everybody.